Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bolt Report. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but today we have a very special guest with us that I am thrilled to introduce. A graduate of Syracuse University. He interned with the Syracuse Crunch from 2012 to 2014. Then spent time with the Mississippi River Kings of the SPHL and the Elmira Jackets of the ECHL before in September of 2017 joining the Syracuse Crunch full-time as their radio play-by-play announcer for ESPN Syracuse, which he continues to this day. And he also hosts the Shootout Show following Crunch home games and Crunch Weekly on select Thursday nights. Please welcome Lukas Favale.
Hey, well, wonderful introduction there. You kind of forget what you've done after a little while. So a lot of interesting stops along the way, but it's great to be here, and it's great to be in Syracuse as always.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting things off, everybody has their introduction story on how they got into broadcasting. And as you mentioned, there are so many stops along the way that you sort of forget a couple of them. But what was your big thing that got you into broadcasting, that got you wanting to go into radio, whether it was at Syracuse or even before then?
Yeah, it honestly, it has always been something I've wanted to do, and I don't know why. It just was since forever, my entire life, since I was a little kid, this was really it. Not necessarily hockey per se, but it was always, I was 5, 6, 7 years old and outside playing wiffle ball in the backyard, or playing against my brother in whether it was NHL or Madden or whatever video game it was. And I always just found myself blabbing away about what was happening in the game. Like I was doing the play-by-play as a kid, and I think the more I did it, the more I know my grandfather was like, "Oh, you're pretty good at this." I obviously wasn't ready to go on air or anything, but for a little kid, it was, I guess, not terrible. So maybe that reinforced it in my head that this would be something I'd be interested to do. I always, I played sports growing up as well, but I kind of realized, I'm not going to make a career out of athletics at the end of the day. So this was the next best thing. This was the way to stay in sports because I was a big sports fan growing up as well. And so it was, I was in high school and thinking, where do I want to go? What school? Where am I going to end up? Who's got a good broadcasting program? And I'm from New Jersey. And Fordham, which is in the Bronx in New York City, has a pretty good program. So I looked there. But Syracuse was always the place that has it's just the name in sports broadcasting, at least. And so I came up here for a visit and immediately fell in love with the campus and the area. And so ended up here, fortunately. And as you said, I interned with the Crunch. And I think that was when I knew hockey was what I wanted to do, because I first got on campus here. It was a little bit of everything: men's basketball, women's basketball, lacrosse, football, all the sports that you can cover here, both in classes, but most importantly with, all the outside of the class extracurricular activities, the student stations and whatnot. But then I was my junior year and I got the internship with the Crunch, worked with Dan Duva, who's now with the Vegas Golden Knights, and immediately realized, yep, this is what I want to do. And was here for 2 years. And then that kind of what started the hockey side of the journey. But ever since I can remember, it's kind of been broadcasting or bust for me. And thankfully, so far, I haven't gone bust yet.
Yeah, for example, one of my professors from this most recent semester actually went to Syracuse, and not for broadcasting, but for journalism. And he talked about how that was a big thing for him, was, that really paved the way. He got to cover everything and he got to pick and choose what he wanted to do. I assume your journey was pretty much the same, and you got to see everything that you wanted to do and then got to pick something.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different opportunities, and it's amazing now that I'm back. I don't live on campus, but I'm so close to campus now, back in the city. Just to see, even I graduated in 2014. So what are we, 7 years later, and how many more opportunities are now presented with, the students have access to working for the ACC network up there on campus. And so it's just astounding, which is great. Like, it was great when I was a student. It's even better now. And yeah, you have so many opportunities in so many different sports or different fields, whether it's on air, whether it's just, writing for the student paper, or just so many different avenues where you can explore. And then eventually, I mean, everyone finds their path at some point, even if it's, not in school, but you get enough of a rounded education, and then down the line you figure it out. I was fortunate enough to know where I wanted to go while I was still in school. But yeah, you get so many different opportunities and different chances to kind of just dip your toe in the water to see if it's something you want to do, or see if it works, or if you need to work a lot at that, if you're interested in it and you need to get a lot better. So that's how it went. And then, like I said, when I got this internship with the Crunch, I mean, I've always been a hockey fan, but just to learn what goes on just behind the scenes a bit was great. And then just the day in and day out, excitement of working for a professional hockey team was just something that intrigued me. And obviously, to be on air was what I wanted to do, and it's all worked out so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've talked about, you've been on the air for a long time, whether it's the SPHL, the ECHL, or now with the AHL. Is there one call or one moment in your career, either you look back on fondly, or maybe a lot of people instantly recognize, hey, that's Lukas Favale?
I don't know if there's a key moment. I mean, there's been so many great, exciting moments along the way. I mean, I was fortunate when I was an intern, the Crunch, and we brought that back over the last 2 years now. We had television broadcasts as well. And so as an intern, when, Dan Duva, as I said, was a broadcaster here at the time, would be doing those games on television, he gave some opportunity for us as interns to do the games on the air on the radio. So it was a wonderful opportunity at that point. I mean, it was only a handful of games my first year, but the 2012-13 season, my first year as an intern, was the Crunch's first year as an affiliate with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they went all the way to the Calder Cup Finals. And so here I am, however old I was, let's say 2013, I got to do the math. I think I had just turned 21, and I'm calling a game of the Calder Cup Finals on a local radio station. It's obviously a huge matchup, the Crunch and the Grand Rapids Griffins, Game 6. That year, the Crunch fell down 3-0 against Grand Rapids, and then won 2 games on the road, came back and brought it home to Syracuse in Game 6. And Andre Schuster, who was just a rookie at the time, just getting his feet wet in pro hockey, scores a tying goal about halfway through the third period in Game 6. And I'd never heard a building as loud as that was that night. And I'm calling it, and I'm a college kid, so it's not a perfectly polished broadcast by any stretch of the imagination, but it was certainly passable, and that was a moment that for a while stood out to me, and then had more opportunities the next year. But yeah, there's been great moments along the way. In the SPHL hockey, the level of hockey is not where we are in the AHL, but my first year there, the team went to the final, and they had a thrilling double overtime win against the defending champs to move on. So those are some moments. And then the Crunch, since I've been back here, almost always been a good team, and there's been some thrilling moments in the course of all of that. So I don't know if there's one. I mean, I mentioned a couple, I guess, but there's nothing besides those that really stand out. Besides just, there's every season has so many. Unless you're really thinking about it, there's so many moments that they happen. Then you're like, unless you're reflecting about it, you kind of forget about it a little bit until you're thinking back, whoa, that was. You're looking at a box score. You're just thinking about how the season went as a whole. And, oh boy, that was a big goal. Boy, Alex Barre-Belay scored this goal here. Oh, Ross Colton scored that goal there. It's just kind of right now thinking about it. There's nothing that comes right to mind, but there are so many moments that have been in the heat of the moment. They are wonderful.
Yeah, so you mentioned in that answer about Andre Schuster scoring that tying goal in Game 6, and this is his second stint with the organization after going to the Ducks and then going overseas. And he has played a significant amount of games for the Crunch. You develop these personal relationships with players and coaches when you're covering the team. And I know that maybe as an intern, you didn't have the same sort of relationship with someone like Schuster that you would now. But when in your experience, is there anyone that you have covered, whether it was as an intern or in the SPHL or the ECHL or the AHL, that you've continued to follow their career, even if they leave the organization or go overseas or maybe join another team?
It's a great question. There are so many guys, and you're right. We're very fortunate in when I'm able to do that. We do form these, relationships. I travel with the teams, so whether they like it or not, they see me a lot, and I talk to them a lot for better or for worse for their side of things. But there are a ton of guys who have come in, and being with the Crunch, we've been so fortunate with the Lightning that they, above all else, they really do get good people in the organization. So. They are people who are genuinely nice people who are willing to have a conversation or are willing to chat with you and are willing to keep that relationship going. And so whether it's just someone who gets called up and scores their first goal or makes their debut and you just shoot them a text or whatever, they'll get right back to you. They'll respond to you. They'll keep that relationship going, which is wonderful to for us. And some guys, like a Ross Colton, for example, who was here, he was great while he was here. And he's been just as receptive and just as responsive since he's been up in Tampa Bay. Like a guy like Alex Barry-Boulet, who he was always a guy, and he's back obviously with the Crunch right now. He always said he didn't like the timing of the team's pregame meals, and every team has the same 12 to 2. That's when you get the team has their pregame meal. And so I would always go down at the end and he'd be creeping in at the end as well. So we'd always have the pregame meal together basically. So he's a fun guy to have had a relationship with. And, he went out to Seattle for the couple of weeks and we're happy to have him back, of course, but you wish him well at that point. A goalie like Connor Ingram, who was here for a couple of years and was traded by the Lightning. He's a guy I've kept in touch with. So there's a lot of players who have come through who you just, like I said, I don't think we've had one real, bad guy come through here since I've been here. And so while maybe I don't have the same relationship with everyone that I have with certain guys, there's, the couple of guys I mentioned, Cal Foote has been great every time he's been here or up in Tampa or whatever. So I'm trying to think who else has really left the organization since I've been here. There's been a lot of guys who've just stuck around. Obviously some guys have gone overseas and something we have started here with the Crunch recently was is a new podcast for us, and it's a couple months old now, Crunch Chronicles, and it's a chance for us to we just talk to our Crunch alumni basically. And this is the 10th year of the affiliation with the Lightning, but it's the 28th year now of the Crunch. So we have so many players that obviously I wasn't here for all of them, but just a chance to talk with either guys I've interacted with over the years or some guys I've never talked to before. That's been a whole lot of fun as well. So, I talked to Eddie Pasquale for one of our first episodes, who was here for, a year and a half, and he was, numbers wise, one of the best goalies in Crunch history. And he was a riot when he was here. He was a riot on the podcast. So, just the more I think about it, the more guys there are, and they're all just wonderful people, and it's great to be able to catch up with them whenever we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the Lightning have done a great job, just as a fan's perspective, of getting, as you mentioned, those good people. They've had their missteps here and there. Not going to name any individual names, but overall, I think they've done a really good job of making sure that they are a top-notch organization in everything that they do. One of the things that we talked about before the show was in trying to find a time for this, that the Crunch have many weekend games. Their schedule is a bit different compared to that of an NHL team where you play every basically 2 to 3 days. For a broadcaster, can you take us through what a normal day of prep may look like? You have had constant back-to-backs or 3 games in 3 nights or 3 games in 4 nights. What does that schedule look like? Does that make it more difficult for you? I'd love to hear the difference of, what we talked to Dave Randolph about with, what your schedule might look like.
Yeah, for the AHL, well, this year is going to be changing rapidly because of how many postponements the Crunch have gone through with COVID protocol this year, which is obviously it's the nature of the business. So I know our schedule by the end of the year is going to be quite full. But in a typical season, and at the start of the year this year, it's almost a good thing. The AHL, you said it is pretty, at least for the Crunch, is a very regular schedule. Most weeks in most years is Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and you kind of fall into that pattern After the first month of the year, it's all right, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. You might mix in a Sunday occasionally, but that's kind of, at least since I've been back, the league has done a good job of eliminating or very much limiting 3-and-3s, 3 games and 3 nights. And again, there are going to be more of those as this year progresses just because of the reschedules. But so you kind of fall into that routine, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and you get used to preparing for each game. And another difference at this level as opposed to the NHL is just the volume of games you face against very similar opponents. So for example, the Crunch, and I'll get to the prep in a minute here, but it all does apply. So the Crunch in their North Division, they have there's 7 teams in the division this year, so they don't face the same number of opponents the same number of times. The Crunch are not even an hour away from Utica, so they face the Utica Comets 14 times this year. Face the Rochester Americans another hour and change away 12 times. Then you get a team like Toronto, you face them 4 times. They're in the division as well. So it's just the way that the schedule works. It's travel and travel costs are obviously at the forefront of those decisions at the AHL level, plus building rivalries and having fans being able to travel back and forth. So by the end of the year, I know the Utica Comets lineup and roster as well as I know the Crunch roster. So it is much easier, and especially in those nights where you have back-to-backs, Friday, Saturdays, or 3-and-3, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It is much easier to prepare for those games because, listen, I know who's on that team just as well as I know who's on the Crunch. At the start of the year, it's more of a challenge of figuring out who's on whose roster. There's a lot of turnover at this level. You do your normal prep work. In the morning, I will talk to, the Crunch don't skate in the morning typically, unless you're a scratch. The scratch players will go on the ice, but there's not normally a full team skate on the morning of the game. So I will talk with our coaches or players or whoever gets some interviews for the game that night. And then it's just, the rest of the day, there are other things I need to do outside of just my broadcast responsibilities. So there's a chunk of my day that is taken up by that. So there's a lot of work earlier in the week that kind of gets me in the position where I'm ready to go for each game that night. But kind of the rule of thumb for me is for every hour I'm on the air, it's at least 3 hours of prep away from it. And so it might not be the day of the game. It might be, the night before or the Monday for a Wednesday, and then maybe a Thursday for the Friday, Saturday. However it all works out, it's kind of different, depends on the opponent. But that's just kind of the way it goes. You have conversations with the Crunch, the players, the coaches. I'll try to talk to the visiting broadcast. Well, definitely talk to the visiting broadcaster beforehand. Usually, especially for Utica or Rochester, they're not getting to the arena until 5 o'clock. They're not in for the morning either. Like they're traveling day of game, and that's the case. A lot of our opponents as well. So it's not like I'm watching them skate in the morning or talking with any of their guys. So again, a lot different than what the NHL will see or what Dave would have gone through for his prep stuff. But I do like the regularity of our schedule. It does make it a little easier in that regard to be ready to go for the Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday, and the occasional Sunday.
Yeah, so the regularity, as you mentioned, is sort of going to change this season with all the postponements. And as we talked about Dave Randolph already, when we discussed how he has sort of gone through his normal play-by-play duties during the day, at that time, the Lightning were not allowing the broadcasters in the building. It was a remote sort of production that they had to, in his words, basically duct tape together because it was a very difficult situation. They didn't know what exactly was going on. So I assume that the Crunch had a very similar situation in which you were watching it remotely rather than actually going to the stadium. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but what were some of the challenges or maybe even benefits from this remote location broadcasting?
Well, it actually wasn't. It was all in arena, which was great.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, but last year, the challenge last year the AHL season was so short. It was not a matter of wins and losses. There was playoffs last year. I couldn't travel with the team last year. But as I kind of mentioned, we're very close to some opponents. Utica, last year we placed only 3 opponents. We faced Utica, Rochester, and Wilkes-Barre Scranton. So all of those teams are within 2 hours of a drive. So while I couldn't travel on the bus with the team based on protocols and all of that stuff, the league and everyone was okay with visiting broadcasters traveling. Some did travel with their team. It depended on, I guess, the team's approach to things. The team did not want me traveling, which is fine. So I drove myself. It was an hour away to Utica or Rochester, about 2 hours to Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. So very easy drives. It was only 16 times total, however, I don't remember how many for each of those, but we only played 32 games total last year, so 16 road games. So that was very easy. It was glad to be in the building. There was only one game where I wasn't sure if I'd be able to go, and that was the day after I got my second vaccine, and I wasn't feeling great in the morning, but by the time I had to leave for the game, I had taken a nap and felt great and good to go. So I was prepared to call those games remotely if necessary, but didn't have to do it. And this year, it's we've been good to be in our building last year and this year, and I'm back on the bus this year traveling with the team as well. So I've been very fortunate. I know there are so many hurdles to having to call a game remotely, and I know a lot of broadcasters, whether it's in hockey, baseball, any other sports, had a lot of grumblings, at least by the end of it, having to do things remotely. And I know some teams are still doing it remotely, but I've been very fortunate to be in the building, and you do lose a lot by not being in a building with the atmosphere and obviously not being able to see everything. NHL teams can pull it off because they've got more cameras, they've got more, technology, more equipment to kind of let everyone see everything if you're calling it remotely. The AHL, for us, we would basically just be relying on whatever the regular viewer is watching on AHL TV. So we'd be very much hampered and limited with that. And I know teams had to do it last year in our league, but I did not want to have to risk either internet issues or replays popping up out of nowhere and me missing action or whatever. So I made a pretty conceited effort to get to all the buildings. And fortunately, knock on wood, I've done that so far over the last year and a half.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by that because I would have thought that the NHL with all the protocols that they had taken, like the AHL, they don't have necessarily the funds to really make it work. So I really thought that they would have had even stronger protocols, but that's a very interesting answer.
I mean, yeah, the protocols are very, they're very similar, AHL and NHL, just was from the broadcast perspective. Like, again, last year there was no one in the building anyway, for fans and anything. So it wasn't, me sitting up in my broadcast booth wasn't going to affect one person or another. And I wasn't on the bus, so it wasn't like I was in contact with the players. Everything else was remote with interviews and on Zoom and whatnot. So it was just me physically being in there, but I was not around anyone. So I guess from that perspective, it wasn't a major issue for the league.
Yeah, so last question before we move on to the team itself. Rick Peckham had his retirement at the end of 2019-2020, at the end of the first round in Lightning's eventual Cup win. Was there any conversation or any thoughts about potentially moving from radio to television, and any conversations with the Lightning about potentially taking over that role?
I never really moved forward with, talking with the Lightning about it. And to be perfect, I mean, at some point I would love to get into television. At that point, I had never really done television to the extent that I thought would be necessary to fill those shoes. In the last year and a half now, since then, we have branched out and redeveloped our television broadcast here, which is, I think, one of the things down the line is going to be a great benefit for the Crunch coming out of the pandemic. We, for years, had been on television for, 10, 12, 14 games a year. And then that had ended just before I had gotten here, just because, the TV contract or the station it was on kind of dissolved. And so they hadn't branched out back onto television. And so last year, without having the chance to get fans in the building, we thought it was important for our fans to be able to, follow the team on television, not just on AHL TV, but to have it on, broadcast television in the city. And so I think that's one of the big benefits for the Crunch coming out of it, and indirectly and directly it affects me, and that's a good benefit for me as well. So to be blunt, no, I didn't think I was perfectly qualified for that position, and I think obviously they made a great hire in Dave. He's done a great job in filling those enormous shoes that Rick left behind. So yeah, at some point I think I would love to at least try television at that level, but I do love radio. Radio is a great medium. It's a wonderful way to connect with listeners. But yeah, I am open to either medium at this point.
That is a solid next step, I guess, in the progression, of of your career. Now, uh, going to the Crunch, they've had a down year overall. Last year they were very good in the limited games that they played, but they did not participate in the playoffs. This year has been a bit of a different story, but several players have really stepped up big time. Charles Hudon, Gabriel Dumont, they've been great leaders for the team. Sean Day has been excellent scoring on the back end, and then Cole Koepke has been a really, really solid surprise for the forwards. What, in your opinion, has been the biggest bright spot?
There's been a lot of good things have happened so far for the Crunch this year. Just the wins and losses haven't been there, as you kind of alluded to, and part of it is it's the nature of the AHL. But this year, I don't think one time the Crunch have ever had the lineup they envisioned at the start of the year, just based on injuries in Tampa Bay that has led to recalls or injuries here. And that happens every year, of course. So it's not an excuse. It's just I know it has hurt the Crunch more this year than it has in years past. But you mentioned Gabriel Dumont. He's been a wonderful re-addition to this organization. He was a big part of the team's run of the finals in 2017. He was the captain here the following year in 2018, 2019. Then was with the Wild organization for a couple of years. He's back. He's the captain again. He is. Ben Grew recently said, Gabriel Dumont is our leading scorer, and he's not supposed to be, but he is, just because he is. In the last couple of years, he's really found his. He's always been a good scorer at this level, but he has really taken it to the next level in the American Hockey League from his scoring perspective. So he's been great for the Crunch. Cole Koepke, I think, is coming into his game a bit. He's still rounding out his. It's the nature of being a rookie in this league. You got to find your way to play in all three zones, and he's starting to get to that point now. But his offense is coming along nicely. There's a lot of good stories coming out of this year so far. I think Gabe Fortier has been the biggest bright spot, of course. I mean, he's not with the team as we talk right now. He's back up in Tampa Bay, or at least he got his call up, and it's been with the Lightning. And who knows, once some of those guys, Kucherov and Point, return, I'm sure Fortier will probably end up with a Crunch again. That's just my hunch, just based on the numbers up there in Tampa Bay, assuming no one else gets hurt. But he was off to a great start this year. He had a really good year last year as a rookie, and came in, and just the way he plays is, you can see it at the NHL level, but he brings that fire, that feistiness to the AHL level. He can score at this level. He's a big penalty killer. He really does a lot of good things for the Crunch. And so I think seeing him take that next step this year, both here and then getting that opportunity with the Lightning, I don't think it's a surprise, but it's always good to see. You want to see your prospects each year take a step forward. And I think from him, we have certainly seen that this year, and that's why he's up in Tampa Bay. Then you get a guy like Jimmy Huntington, who got off to a great start and had a hat trick in the first weekend of the year. He kind of leveled off a bit as we've gone, but you can tell he's also taking those steps this year where, his rookie year, he didn't score a lot. Last year, he finally started scoring a bit. This year, he's scoring a bit more. So he's a guy taking another step. And then you mentioned Sean Day, too, who, last year didn't know what to expect from him. He's a guy who had such a high ceiling when he got into the OHL, the exceptional status at that level, which is so rare. And it didn't work out necessarily at the OHL level for him, but he's an intriguing player. And last year there were flashes of it, but he was still finding his way. And this year he's been great. Like defensively, he's so confident when he carries the puck. An excellent skater, which is what made him such an intriguing player when he was a 15-year-old way back in the day as well. So I think there's a bright future for him. There's a reason he had a call up earlier this year, even though he didn't play. I think the Lightning found a real good one when they signed him last year.
Yeah, I think with a lot of Lightning fans in general, when they look at who could potentially get called up, it is all these young, exciting players. But that, I guess, leads me to my next question, which is there are only 6 players on the roster that are 27 or older. Is this a case of the Crunch potentially being too young, still trying to find themselves and potentially struggling in the records department?
I mean, part of it is just the nature of the American Hockey League. I mean, every team is young in this level. There is the veteran rule that is in place, so you can't have more than 5 or 6 guys. You have a veteran exempt status as well who have hit the 260 game mark at this at pro hockey, at the AHL or higher. So it is the nature of the way this league is. It is a development league at the end of the day. The Crunch are very young this year. There's no doubt about it. And last year, it's kind of interesting. Last year, everyone talked about it was just a year to develop for young players, and it was great to get on the ice, but the level of play across the board in the AHL was not where it is this year. And so you wonder how much that affected, especially the rookies from last year, who maybe they looked great last year. They looked like they were more comfortable than they were. And it might have just been because the level of competition was not where it is this year because of the taxi squads last year. A lot of the veteran players who would have been in the AHL a year ago spent either some time or a lot of the season or all of the year on a taxi squad last year, just because that was the way it was, and teams needed their extra bodies just in case there was an outbreak on their team. And so last year, the rosters were extraordinarily young. There was, I don't know, maybe the Crunch had 2 veterans on their team last year. Luke Witkowski, who got hurt. They had Scott Wilson here for a bit from the Florida Panthers because the Crunch were a dual affiliate last year. And that might have been it. I can't remember any other veterans. So the Crunch were exceptionally young last year. And you just wonder how much a year like last year, you see a lot of rookies take steps as their year progresses. A, was a shorter year. B, it was an odd year from a competition standpoint. And so I think that not only the Crunch, I think a lot of teams are going through it. So it's not just a Crunch issue. But I think the Crunch are young this year, and some of the young players are still finding their way at this level. And you got a rookie like Gage Gonsalves, who has been hurt a couple of times. He's been exciting when he's on the ice. Simon Reifers, who's here for the first time in North America, has been pretty good, and he's getting better as we go. So there's just a lot of things that are they're at play here for the Crunch. I don't think there's just one thing, but I do think that the team has been making pretty steady progress of late.
Yeah, absolutely. They have looked a lot better, even if the wins haven't necessarily been there. But as you mentioned, they have all those young guys that have shown a lot of potential. Like I know that over the preseason, a lot of Lightning fans were really invested in Fortier. A lot of guys were really invested in Koepke, Huntington. Off the top of my head, can't remember his name. Simeon Reifors was a guy that really a lot of people were excited about. And then you remember that the competition isn't exactly the same in the AHL as it is in the preseason. And people aren't necessarily trying as hard, especially if they are NHL talents who already have their spots locked up. But final question on the Crunch. Their biggest issue from just a viewer's perspective seems to be their goaltending and specifically their injuries, with both Hugo Neufeld and Maxime Lagacé missing significant time. Do you feel like the defensive structure around the team needs to be better now that they are coming back? And Amir Miftahov, thank you. It's a very different.
We got a lot of doozies, especially in goal. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. But do you feel like, he carried the load for a significant amount of time when both of the guys were hurt? Do you feel like the defensive structure needs to be better now that everybody is starting to get healthy and they actually have people that they recognize that they can play in front of?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that the Crunch can improve defensively as the season progresses. It's a very young blue line, especially, at times Freddie Claesson and Andre Schuster were both up in Tampa Bay for a good stretch there early in the season. So those are your 2 veteran pieces back there. Sean Day's been, as we mentioned, very good. Darren Radish was hurt for a while. Taylor Radish's brother, who is in his first year in the organization. So he's a guy who they expect a lot out of. He was hurt for a stretch. And then you got a couple of, young players like Alex Green's in his second year. He's still finding his way. He's one of those guys who we mentioned last year looked very good and now is trying to figure out where exactly he fits in the pecking order of everything now that the level of competition has picked up again. they got a lot of PTOs on this team who just filling the void with injuries and guys up in Tampa Bay. So I think defensively, yeah, the Crunch do need to tighten up a little bit, and they will as they get more of their pieces back into place. At least that's the hope. But yeah, from the goaltending perspective, it is. I mean, they've been hit hard for sure. You mentioned Max Legacy getting hurt in the first game of the season. So you come in and you know how important that number 3 goalie is to an organization cannot be understated, because if there's ever an injury up in Tampa Bay or whatever NHL team it is, that number 3 goalie in the organization is a guy coming up, and you want him to be a reliable, you know, guy who can come into a game and if he needs to play, or at least be a guy who in a pinch has to come in as a backup or whatever it might be, you want him ready to go. And you know, in the summer they signed Max Legacy, and you expect him to be that guy, and gets hurt in the first game, missed a month, came back and he's got sick. So he's kind of been up and down. He's still trying to just get in the net and be consistent for a stretch here, which is, I think once he gets going, he's one of the best goalies in this league, but we haven't seen it yet because he hasn't been able to get in there at a consistent enough level. Hugo Alnefelt, he's kind of had a rocky start here in his first year, and that's, I hate to say it's kind of expected, but it's a rookie at this level. It's not easy as a goaltender in this league, and it's very rare where you see a rookie goalie come right in and excel. And he's had flashes, there's no doubt, and he's had flashes where it's where he looks like a rookie, and that's the way it is. And I don't think anyone should be surprised by that. Then he gets hurt as well. He got set back a bit, and he's trying to find his way back. He played a couple of games in the ECHL with Orlando, just trying to find his game form again. So we'll see him back at some point with the Crunch. He's on the roster now. And then you mentioned Amir. He was supposed to be in the ECHL, was here the first weekend once Max got hurt, and he was our best goalie. He's been our best goalie for the most part this year. He had a bad hiccup in Charlotte a week or so ago, but other than that, he's been pretty good. He won his first 3 starts. He had a shutout in there. It's been a while since he's won a game, but for the most part, he's given the Crunch a chance to win. So it's all you can really ask for out of a goaltender, and we'll see how that continues. And as you kind of mentioned, the defense will hopefully tighten up around these guys once they get more of a consistency back, whether it's from the defensive side of things or from the goaltending side of things. They just need more consistency as a whole.
Yeah, and it feels like from how you mentioned, you know, rookie goaltenders, and especially Hugo, that Amir, I'm just going to call him Amir because I can't get that last name. But Amir and Connor Ingram are sort of the exceptions, not the rule, in terms of how a rookie goaltender is supposed to perform in the AHL. But when we were looking at the Lightning per se, and we said, okay, if Vasilevsky or Brian Elliott gets hurt, who do you call up? Well, you call up Amir. Well, who then plays goal for the Crunch? Because both of the other 2 options are injured. Like that must have been a really difficult time for Crunch management in trying to figure out, you know, how will we keep the organization, this middle level of the organization, afloat if there happens to be a goaltending issue.
Yeah, well, thankfully, I'm not making those decisions. I'll leave that up to Stacey Roost and Matthew Darsh and everyone else with the Lightning to figure out what situation needs to arise there. But I mean, you're right. Like it's always a concern, and that's why this year at the start of the year we preseason you go, boy, you never like to have 3 goalies who are at this level or could be at this level, because it creates, I don't want to say issues, but it's just you got almost too many goalies. And then immediately you're down 1 after the first game, and you're down a second very quickly after that. And the Crunch at one point had an emergency backup for 1 game just because they had to. I don't remember who got hurt or who left or whatever the situation was at one point. And then you bring in a PTO up from Orlando for a weekend, and here he is just in case he didn't play in a game. Alex Dubois, who's now, I think he went to Denmark maybe, or somewhere in Europe. He's now overseas, but it's certainly a concern. Knock on wood, no one gets hurt up in Tampa Bay, at least from the goaltending perspective. But at this point, with Max Legacy healthy, I would imagine if one of those 2 gets hurt, he would be the first guy to get called up, just because he is a guy who's played in the NHL before. He is you would at least expect him to be the guy who would fill those shoes as a backup more readily, but I don't know. That's just me guessing. And like I said, thankfully, I'm not the one making those decisions.
Yeah, Dubois is currently playing in DEL, so
Okay. Yeah.
they don't have him, unfortunately, as an option anymore. But it definitely is a very challenging time for just the goaltending situation because it goes from a zero panic level to 100. I remember one game. There was a rumor. I don't know if it was confirmed. I think Lagasse may have played with a broken hand because Amir uh, played so many games up to that point. Like
that I haven't heard.
okay, that might have just been a friend who was at the game, but they said that he did not look the same. So I guess I'm gonna just say, that was just a rumor.
Yeah,
And
that one I have not heard of. It's possible, but that would be news to me.
yeah. Okay, finally we have our fan questions. This one comes from Joe Lilly 00 on Twitter. What is your favorite thing to do outside of hockey, whether it's watching it or commentating on it?
Well, it depends on the time of the year, I guess. In hockey season, I like to call hockey season puzzle season for me. I do puzzles to keep my mind, well, at least to get my mind off of hockey because we do so much at the rink. So when I get home, it's puzzle time for me. So I've got puzzles going pretty much throughout the course of the winter. Obviously here in Syracuse, it is not as much fun to venture outside in the middle of the winter. So we kind of have to find something to do indoors. And yeah, puzzles have been something for me that I've enjoyed. They just kind of take your mind off of things a bit. I'll usually pop in an audiobook and sit with a puzzle for a little bit. I will definitely watch hockey at night as well. But yeah, that's the main thing for me. I'll either read, I'll listen to audiobooks or podcasts, and work on a puzzle in the course of the winter. Now in the summer, I like to be outside. I play tennis, I golf, I do all that sort of stuff. I like to be to move around in the summer. It's our time to kind of recharge the batteries a bit, and so I like to kind of take it a little easier in the summer. That's really anything outside for me is enjoyable. I hit the gym in the morning. I'm a morning gym guy, so with summer or winter, I'll do that. I'll come to work. I'll be at the office, and then it's the puzzle the rest of the night mainly. So I'm kind of boring. I don't do a whole lot of crazy stuff, but the puzzles are how I get through the winter more often than not. I mean, I have an Xbox, so I'll occasionally pop that on as well, but it's not something I do too often.
Yeah, I mean, hey, boring's okay. I love puzzles. My family loves puzzles, so it's always something that gets us to find some common ground. And then finally, this is a fan question from me. Doing research for this, I found a video of you at Syracuse's Italian Fest, winning a meatball eating contest by eating 10 in 1 minute. How did that contest come about, and have you had the opportunity to defend your crown?
Yes, I am a three-time reigning champion now in the meatball contest. So I got to do the math. I guess 2018 would have been the first year we did it, or they did it. It's been something that they've had going for a couple of years. Well, it was the first year I was involved in it, I should say. They had done it at least a year or two prior to that. But every year there's an Italian Fest downtown. It's a big event, whatever it is. I think usually September, maybe late August. And so they do a meatball eating contest. And so that one year they reached out to us and asked if it was for charity. So they asked if we had anyone who would want to participate. And I said, absolutely, sign me up. I'm Italian. I love meatballs. Let's give it a whirl. I had never been in a meatball eating contest or any other food eating contest for that matter, but I love to eat. I love food. I love meatballs. Give it a try. So yeah, we went out there and won the first year. I think I took the competition by storm. I was not messing around. I was mashing up the meatballs, my hands just scarfing them down. So the second year, in 2019, they changed the rules on us, and yeah, had to use one hand with a fork, and so that became a whole new issue, which they didn't tell us until the day of, and so you know, it was kind of, they were, I think, trying to throw a curveball at me specifically, but won it again that year. It was a little closer, but I still found a way. They did not have it in 2020 because of the pandemic, so that was unfortunate. I don't know if I would have gotten the invite if they did have it, though. I think they wanted someone else. And then this past year, I think they forgot that they didn't want me back, so I got the invite again and won it for a third year in a row. And they changed the rules one more time. They made you swap hands and do something else. I don't remember exactly what, but won it again. So I am a three-time meatball eating champion. And then in the course of all of that, must have been 2 years ago. I think it was after I won my second one. Joe Roberts, who was at the time the voice of the Utica Comets, challenged me to a hot dog eating contest. So I don't like hot dogs, but I said, all right, let's give it a whirl. And so one of our partners who is kind of right between us and Utica, Turning Stone Resort Casino, they got involved in it. I made it a 2 versus 2 because I knew I was going to lose the hot dog eating contest probably because, again, I don't like hot dogs. So we got one of my coworkers involved as well. Utica cheated as always. We ended up winning. So I'm a 3-time meatball eating champion. I'm a hot dog eating champion. Next up is pies. I'm a dessert guy, so I need to find a pie eating contest. That's where I'm at in my mind.
Yeah, you're a trailblazer though. You made them change the rules.
I did. Well, the funny thing is, this, like I said, I don't think I would have gotten invited back in 2020. In 2021, we reached out to them, and they weren't sure if they were going to do it. And then I guess I was so passionate about it, they said, "All right, we got to do this." They had to change the rules of that. They had to, with all the distancing regulations and whatnot with the pandemic, they had to change some of the rules in that department as well. But yeah, I think it was such a curveball. 2 years ago, they weren't going to invite me back. This past year, they did it only because of me. So I don't know. I'm a trailblazer. I almost destroyed the meatball eating contest, and then I saved it.
Yeah. Well, here's to seeing what 2022 has to, if they're going to do it again, and if they invite you back for sure. But Lukas Favale, thank you so much for joining us, guys. That is going to do it for us on this edition of the Bolt Report. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on Twitter at @BoltReport_TB. Also, make sure to check out our website. I have another article coming out detailing the last 5 games of the Lightning's revamped schedule. We'll call it that. But again, Lukas Favale, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.